my doctoral work, I was working as part of a very large research group in the UK. It was a collaboration between the University of Cambridge, Exeter, and Queen's in Belfast, and we were looking at divided cities in contested states. So it was a comparative study. And my study of the cities where I did research was Mostar. And I guess my overarching research goal or interest is in sort of challenging mainstream representation of Bosnia and Herzegovina as solely a divided country where people hate each other. I was interested in looking at how, especially the city of Mostar, becomes divided as a way to understand how that process of division could be somehow subverted. And from there, I became really interested in doing more research about grassroots movements. And in order to understand how grassroots movements, and especially political activists create spaces in the city where sort of change is already being imagined and produced, just like somehow it's also a matter of representation, how these people are often not acknowledged for what they do or taken in consideration. So the reason why I applied for this place here, for this fellowship, was because of the call on protest. And I was very interested in continuing my research in Bosnia by looking at the protest that happened last year in 2014. And I was particularly interested in the fact that during the protest, actually this was came from an observation, and during the protest, when people were interviewed or were sort of releasing statements on their Twitter rather than Facebook, there was this overwhelming use of the term hope, how people were hopeful that things could change. And then from there I started thinking how I could use that as a frame to look at the protest. So what I'm doing is I'm looking at these protests in 2014 in Bosnia through the lens of affect. And I'm really interested in sort of exploring how affects such as hope or anger or frustrations brought people together in the first place. And I'm also interested in sort of reflecting more conceptually on how we can use affect theories in order to explore and talk about political activism and political discourses. So I have finished my fieldwork. I was in Sarajevo for a month, conducted interviews mainly with people who were in some sort of capacity leading the protest in 2014. And now I'm in the process of sort of analyzing my data. And for the future, I think, well, one thing I have to say is that I'm very thankful for being here, especially because I know that this project would have not been funded by many institutions, because it doesn't have any policy outcome, it doesn't have any practical briefing for policymakers, and I know, from my experience, because I have been applying for many jobs since I finished my PhD, that it's really rare to find people who take the risk to sponsor and to fund projects that are a bit cutting edge. Let's put it like that. So I would like to, but I see the potential of what I'm doing, and I would really like to continue this in the sense that my main research interest is really in conflicts and conflicts in cities. And I think that obviously in these 5 months I won't be able to finish all I wanted, but I think in these 5 months I will be able to sort of reflect on the first results from my interviews, but also have an understanding of what kind of methodologies could be used to conduct such a project. And I would really like to continue this in the sense that the protest in Bosnia ended, but those networks that were created during the protest, and there are grassroots networks across the country, are still existing. And I'm really sort of like curious in continuing exploring how these networks are sort of like planning to continue working together, and what does that mean for the future of the country.